Good morning, everybody. I'm Mort Zuckerman. I'm the chairman and editor-in-chief of U.S. News and World Report, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the National Press Club and this morning's breakfast and discussion, which is entitled Making Science Cool, Solving the Shortage of Math and Science Teachers and Students. Today's topic on science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, STEM education could not be more timely. I think it is the most urgent aspect of education reform because it is not only about the future, but about the present. It is about teaching and inspiring students in global competition, but it is also about jobs, and not just jobs, but jobs that are available right now. There's no more important issue in America. So what this kind of an education will do for the individual student will also benefit the nation. Companies can't fill these jobs because of the issues being discussed by our distinguished participants today. Specifically, the persistent achievement gaps in science and math education among America's young people and the need to raise the baseline talent for jobs, American jobs, that a robust STEM education would achieve. Indeed, with STEM education being so critical to America's innovative capacity and ultimately a thriving national economy, STEM progress should and could certainly be under the microscope among lawmakers and policy experts as we enter a year of election campaigning, or maybe 10 years of election campaigning. As part of our growing interest at U.S. News in addressing the STEM crisis, we're launching this morning a new rankings of America's best high schools for math and science. The rankings are a way to highlight success and best practices and hopefully to provide examples that others can learn from. Congratulations to High Tech School in Lincroft, New Jersey, Basis School in Tucson, Arizona, and Thomas Jefferson High School right here in Alexandria, Virginia. You can find the rest of the winners on usnews.com. I'm sure that today's panel of experts will add greatly to our understanding of this complex yet vitally important issue. Knowing that they all have significant pressures on their time, on behalf of U.S. News and World Report, I'd like to thank each of them for being with us this morning and sharing their considerable expertise. I also want to extend thanks to our corporate sponsors, Dell Inc. and AT&T. Both Dell and AT&T have shown great interest in STEM education through their many corporate and community initiatives. Their participation in open forums like today's summit only underscores their commitment and advocacy. I'd like to thank both Bell and AT&T for their vote of confidence in joining U.S. News and all of you here today in this urgent endeavor. We expect to be doing a lot more like this in the future. Finally, I'm going to introduce one of the most important people in guiding American education today. He was a successful businessman and governor of West Virginia, and for more than a decade has brought these much-needed skills to the education sector. He's also a delightful human being. Please welcome the president of the College Board, Gaston Caperton.
Thank you very much, Mort. I didn't realize that I didn't pay enough attention, I should say, that making science cool was going to be the subject, because I spent the last weekend with three of my 5 granddaughters who are 12, 10, and 8, and they would be surprised that their grandfather was talking any place where people were talking about being cool. So if I'd have seen that, I would have not accepted Mort's invitation. Good morning. It's a great honor for me to be part of this discussion with such incredible, smart, and talented people. I want to thank Mort Zuckerman and Brian Kelly, the U.S. News and World Report, for hosting and creating this event. And I think they deserve a hand from all of us. I want to thank Becca Gould for being here and sharing her thoughts and presenting the valuable perspective of a great company like Dell Computing. And I want to recognize my good friend, Governor John Engler. We were governors together. In those days, it was when politics was mainly a part of election and not about governing. We were in those jobs at the right time. I want to start by mentioning a report that came out a few years ago. Most of you have read and are well governed in this thing, Rising Above the Gathering Storm. The report was commissioned by Congress to come up with actions and goals for federal policymaking, fighting to ensure that the United States could successfully compete in the 21st century global economy. The lead author of that report was a remarkable man named Norm Augustine. Norm was the retired chairman and CEO of Lockheed Martin Corporation and former Undersecretary of the Army. He is also a recipient of the National Medal of Technology. So he's somebody that really knows what he's talking about. At a congressional hearing on the findings of the report, Augustine claimed that public education was the foundation of our human capital. And he noted that our public school systems compare abysmally with those in the other developed and underdeveloped nations, particularly in the fields which underpin most innovation: science, mathematics, and technology. Science, math, and technology, along with engineering, these are the three disciplines represent the four pillars of STEM education. They also offer America her greatest hope of prosperity in the 21st century, a century that will be defined by the ability of our greatest innovators to apply their knowledge and their skills. However, the challenge isn't just to have the most scientists, it's to have the most creative scientists, the brightest engineers, and the most open-minded mathematicians. In the coming years, we must address long, simmering problems like climate change, pandemic illness, and energy production. And we will also surely meet the new ones which will require our imagination and our scientific skills. For this, we will need to be at the top of our game. That means a dramatic improvement in STEM education. Recognizing the perils of our impediments and hoping to fill a leadership vacuum, the College Board has made STEM education one of its very top priorities. Through AP courses and exams, as well as partnerships with like-minded organizations, we are undertaking a nationwide effort to maintain America's competitiveness in industries of the future. The AP program has for years been a critical investor in our nation's intellectual blood bank. Recent research tells us that students who take AP science and math courses choose to major in STEM subjects at dramatically higher rates than other students. The research also shows that after taking AP math and science courses, students perform at a much higher level in college math and science courses than students of the same SAT scores who had not taken AP courses. Moving forward, we're in the process of shifting the focus of AP science courses to emphasize just not what students know, but what they can do, the process and practice of science. In other words, the exams are testing less what and more how. We are also exploring the potential of new AP courses in engineering, energy, environment, and anatomy. It can spark a child's interest in any one of these fields, then the possibilities become limitless as the stars. That's what President Dwight D. Eisenhower was thinking about in 1957 when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik and took the lead in the first lap of the space race. The Cold War was heating up, and the U.S. was being left flat-footed at the gate. People were afraid that pretty soon the Soviets would be raining nuclear weapons on us from the sky. Our sense of security was shattered. Some declared the demise of the West and began to count the days that we would be around. But the sun never set on America. Eisenhower made sure of that. And I want you to know I'm a Democrat, but I can talk about a great Republican president. He was a strategic thinker with the capacity to see the forest through the thickness of the trees. And instead of pouring all our resources into building a better Sputnik, the federal government began pouring unmatched amount of money into science, education, engineering, and mathematics. There was a profound shift in the way we looked at ourselves as a country. We realized that education was our best hope, and we charged through the barriers to make sure that America's students would be the best educated in the world. We chose to act, and we rose together. Together we launched Apollo. Together we built the internet. And in 5 decades since Sputnik launched technology that was created as a direct result of our response, helped propel America's economy to an unprecedented strength. We did great things back then, and we must continue to do great things today to set America on a bright path. Together, let us educate our way let us educate our way to prosperity, and let us set America on a brighter path through science. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gaston. You are a wonderful example of somebody who is committed to public service, both in public office and in your capacity as president of the College Board, where you've done so much to break new pathways in education. It's now my pleasure to introduce Becca Gould, who's the Vice President for Global Government Affairs and Public Policy at Dell, for a brief welcome and to introduce our morning panel experts.
Hi, I want to thank you all. I'm pleased to be here both on a professional as well as a personal basis. Obviously, the subject matter is one that needs urgent attention, and it's demonstrated by so many influential people that I've met here today. Our founder, Michael Dell, had a particular interest in science, technology, and education. In fact, he began his company while he was in college. So therefore, we at Dell personally understand the important role technology plays in getting students interested at an early age in STEM subjects. We are linking teachers, students, and parents to content and resources every day through our connected classrooms. And Dell's social innovation competition allows students to turn ideas into new businesses. Dell's Youth Connect brings technology and services to underserved students and teachers. And Tom Luce, the CEO of the National Math and Science Initiative, who's here today, sits on our board, so he makes sure we get it right. Dell's programs, our employees, and our board members provide students with the power to do more, spur on more jobs, and create a more robust global economy. On a personal note, I must tell you I have a long-term commitment to education, and I actively participate in bringing technology to those of you who know it to the Lab School of Washington. I'm also involved in Pyle Middle School and in George Mason, a program on game design that teaches science and technology to underprivileged children through game design. It amazes me today that my son Jasper, at 12-year-old at Pyle, is already taking his first engineering class. The fact that a class in engineering is offered in middle school shows that we're making some progress, but we have a long way to go. And today we gather together to continue that progress with a wide range of speakers and participants. I have long been an admirer of Governor Engler's throughout my career. From his time in the Michigan State House to his years at the National Association of Manufacturers and to his leadership at BRT, I have noted that Governor Engler is a person who gets things done, and particularly in the area of education. This is the kind of leader that we need today. He is a member of the Commission on Skills and American Workforce, and as governor, one of his top priorities was education. And who better to moderate this discussion next than Brian Kelly, editor of U.S. News and World Report. Brian has more than 30 years of experience in journalism, and particularly important to us, helped bring his profession to the internet age. Governor Engler and Mr. Kelly.
Right in the middle here. All right.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you here bright and early. That's what I love about Washington. Get people to come up and talk about something important at 8:30 in the morning. Gives us some hope that maybe we can make some progress. Becca, thank you. We are looking at this issue from a couple of perspectives. Making science cool, as Governor Caperton said, certainly raised some eyebrows with my kids too. As soon as a grown-up uses the word cool, they're immediately suspect. Like, we just couldn't find another word. So we wanted to try to at least begin to move things forward. The panelists who are going to come up after Governor Engler are going to talk about a little more of that cool factor, the teaching piece of it, because I think that's a huge aspect. But there's another aspect of the story, having followed STEM for quite a while, that I think begins to change the conversation, and that is the jobs question. People talk about STEM as a pocket protector issue, and if you're in the journalism business, a pocket protector issue gets relegated to the back pages. It's earnest, but not too sexy. I think that what we've seen in the last few years with the changing structure of the American economy and the situation that we're seeing with the immediate unemployment is really forcing us to rethink a lot of things that we look at in education as well as other spaces. So we are very delighted to have Governor Engler with us, and I wanted to start by asking you, Governor, how do you and your members come at this issue? What do you see as the significant developments here?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me just say thanks for inviting me to be here to be able to represent the Business Roundtable, which is a remarkable collection of about 209 CEOs, American leading companies, but it's also a group of companies that collectively employ directly about 14 million people and spend $150 billion a year in R&D. So it's not just a passing interest at the roundtable that science and technology be strong in this nation. It's the lifeblood for these companies and their ability to compete globally, and virtually all of the roundtable member companies are global competitors. So they've got to go out and take on the best in the world, and to do that, it really often comes down to people and the ability of people to innovate and to create. And so it's a very personal thing in many ways for members, and we have other CEOs that are like Mike Dell that started as mere youth, inventing, creating, thinking about things. We've got others who are not scientific themselves at all, but are the kind of managers who understand exactly what's necessary to create that environment. But with $150 billion spend, we have to keep this always in our focus. And the thing about the jobs focus for a nation today where we've got a 9+% unemployment rate, and we worry about jobs that are unfilled that could be filled if people had the skills to hold them, is that if you can't find the talent here and you're competing globally, what's the answer? You'll have to go somewhere else in the world where that talent is, and how does that help with the U.S. economy and dealing with our own situation? So I think there's a moral imperative, I think there's an economic imperative, and I think U.S. News and World Report, our sponsors like Dell and AT&T, are just, they're really doing something that's important. And I hope in our dialogue today, and we've got a superb panel. Once you have to endure me for a few minutes, and we get this great smart panel up here. But, the other thing I would just say is that I come at it from not only that role, but also as just a father of three juniors in high school. One of them happens to attend the number 3 school on the list, Thomas Jefferson Academy, and she is, in fact, the 3 daughters are kind of a microcosm of what's going on with our America's youth. We got one interested in science, and mathematics in particular. We've got another who's got a great deal of interest, or a great deal of, I would say, aptitude, not so much interest. And then the third one who has no interest at all, who thinks she has to endure it in order to, go through the rite of passage to get to college. And very, very interesting, and I think fruitful for our discussion.
Yeah, no, I think I've got a few of those too, I think. So
well, we got a 16-year-old represented. I learned a new word too, and it was homecoming this past week, and I was asked how it was, and one of the friends said, well, it was tight. What's that mean? That means it's all good. It's all good. It was tight. So we want this science education and technology, STEM, to be tight.
So saving 16-year-olds will be the subject of our next conference, I think. We'll work on that. But so talk about more specifically about the job situation, because I hear from some of your members. They literally are sitting there with unfilled positions today when we have 10 million people unemployed. What kind of positions are these, and why aren't they connecting?
They're at 2 levels. I mean, there are a lot of jobs that don't even require a 4-year graduate education in STEM subjects. They require technical skills. A brilliant scientist in the lab may have a need for 15 technicians supporting them, and some of those positions are unfilled. Today, most processes, whether they're in manufacturing of making some big equipment or engineering some sophisticated compound, they're very technical jobs. We have zero tolerance for error. I mean, you have to make everything perfect, and you've got to do it. If you're going to make a million things, you have to make a million things perfect. You can't have an error. And so the measurements and the devices and the technology, the computers, they're everywhere in a manufacturing process. It's in one sense, it's driven this great productivity, which has put pressure on jobs, but it's also meant then the jobs that we have are themselves much higher level, requiring less brawn and more brain, and that kind of training. So even what would be a line worker in an automotive assembly, something my Michigan background exposes me a little bit to, I mean, they're technology workers also today. And so it's that kind of training. It's the ability to learn and to be constantly relearning, be upgrading skills. And then there is just flat out the need for the scientists, the researchers, and the superb inventors of tomorrow, and the R&D spending that we talk about. I mean, that's led by those project leaders who are brilliant, and we need them in this country. And we've had supply issues. Some it's been met by our immigration policy and H-1B visas. Mort's got an excellent article in the packet about that. We would strongly agree with that. But we would also certainly ask the question, as a nation, if we spend the $650 billion a year on our education system, our public education system, could we not do better? Could we not produce more of our own?
Mm-hmm. What are they saying? I mean, these kids are coming out of the education system, the public education system, and your members who are looking to hire, they're just saying that what they're learning is inadequate to the sort of challenges that they're facing?
I think there's a supply issue. There's not enough of these graduates, and also there is. I think they're able to find superbly talented people, but they need more of them, and I think they also the workforce of tomorrow. We talked a little bit about it last night. Some of us were at dinner. The demographics of the nation are changing as we move to a majority-minority nation. Who comes into the workforce? This has traditionally been, in a lot of these subjects, more male, predominantly male. Today, 60% of the young people in college are female. An increasing proportion of those will be minority students. And we have to have that rising level of interest all the way across the board. Tom's got on your chair a little graph. He didn't want me to steal it, so I won't. But when we get into that, and when he gets into that a little bit later, you'll see there's some supply answers there in terms of people who've got the aptitude but don't have the interest, and others who would have the interest but don't have the skills. And there's a way to be meeting this. But I just think as a nation, we've got to understand that we aren't competing by doing you kind of mass manufacturing of the old days. It's much more value added, much more complex, and unfortunately, because of the speed of which everything moves today, the shelf life of innovation seems to move faster. So it's a Moore's Law kind of application, not just in the world of technology, but frankly being spread all across the world of manufacturing. Faster, 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 newer, 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 and you just keep pressing on. And we've always been able to do that as a nation. Can't lose that.
When you look at the jobs picture, is there a disconnect between what do these jobs look like? What are the descriptions? How are people seeing them? How are they becoming aware that these jobs are available? And how do they, is there a disconnect between understanding the skill sets that they need? I mean, obviously, a 15-year-old is not thinking about an engineering job. How do we create a pathway where there's a carrot out there that says, look, if you do this work, you're going to get something at the end?
These same companies that I represent, just these companies, give something like $9 billion a wage year. A fair amount of that is given actually as a way to try to support innovative programs that are bridging some of these gaps. What never really gets costed out would be the billions that companies spend retraining someone who arrives who supposedly is trained and prepared, that on-the-job workforce education. And I don't think that goes away, because there are specific ways that company A or B might want something done. But I think they would say, and I apologize, we're speaking on behalf of a set of companies. It might be different for individual companies, but generally speaking, and I had 6 years at the National Association of Manufacturers, and this was certainly their thinking as well, is that too many people don't come with the skills that they need. And so part of that training on the job is actually upgrading skills. There are others, and you're seeing, I think, rising interest in more internships, more get somebody into a workplace to get a familiarity. There have been some interesting programs where they've brought teachers in summer programs to actually show them what are the kinds of applications that we're actually doing in these facilities, so that you can connect that back up. In some ways, this seems to be a solvable problem in the information age when we've got so much technology. We should be able to show visually what is it that we're talking about and what's being required, and sort of link that back to the kind of coursework that young people are taking. But this is a complaint or a concern that's not just the high school graduates, even the college graduate. I mean, I've had auto companies in the past say, we can get superbly trained engineers, say nearby from the University of Michigan, for example. But what they lack is any practical application of that great education to actually, how do you put a few things together? And that's why you've also seen in-plant changes where you're now teaming, the wonderfully educated engineer with the online old hand who's actually built stuff, right, and to get that working together. And some of that has some applications to how we think about doing our own education work, I think.
One of the things I hear from people in industry is when they speak off the record, is a real frustration with the education system, with the current public education system, and to some extent even the reform-minded movement. Do you think that's true? And in fact, I've heard people say industry really needs to create a parallel track here. They need to create their own way of moving people into the needs that they have.
Well, if you think about it as a nation, what would be if we really try to summarize, you need every child needs to graduate from high school and be prepared to go to college without needing remediation. That'd save billions. Or be prepared to go to the workforce with a skill that's hopefully been measured and certified. And the dropout rate has to be zero. The biggest mistake the young person in America can make today is not to finish school, certainly not to get their high school. I mean, even the military service is pretty selective about that individual. So at a minimum, that all needs to happen. Now what needs to happen to make that happen? It seems to me, again, that ought to be attainable and that ought to be a challenge. But then we're here saying, well, okay, of those who do graduate, we need a much higher proportion of those who are prepared and taken rigorous enough courses and awakened an interest in science and technology and engineering and mathematics that they want to study those courses. And I do think there, again, modern technology allows us maybe to show young people that there are in the workforce men and women just like them who've come from backgrounds maybe not dissimilar from theirs, who because they had an interest in chemistry or because they fell in love with math, they were able to parlay that into a wonderfully interesting career with a nice income and the ability to support their family, build a better future. I think we can tell those vignettes and probably need to do a much better job. We were talking yesterday, thinking about our conversation we're going to have today. I suspect there's almost nobody who's got a STEM background who's actually available to counsel somebody in a school. I mean, that wouldn't be where somebody of that background, they'd either be in the classroom or they'd be, out doing something else. They're probably not advising, but is that really even necessary? Because we can fill in the gap. We can help young people discover. And I think the other part of what this conversation this morning ought to be about, and why U.S. News and World Report is so important here, is that I do think we can highlight some of the best practices that are there. I mean, to take TJ, and that's just one school, it's different because nobody at that school feels like they're a geeky person, a nerdy person, or there's something odd about them because they're interested in science, math, because everybody in that school is. But that's a magnet school too, and so you come there because that's what you expect. So how do you create that environment in a regular high school that has all kinds of students with all kinds of interests, and that maybe that's a little harder, but again, there are on that list schools that have done it. I mean, they have superb English departments, where kids aren't very interested in science, math, existing alongside that science and math. And I think we need to publicize what is working. We need to explain how people with the same amount of resources have made it happen. Right. Because that is the case.
We hope there's a lot of good case studies on that list, because as you say, each of those schools is individual and has its own set of circumstances, but could be a model for others in that situation. One of the things, as we have gotten into this issue, we at U.S. News, and gotten deeper into trying to understand the issue, one of the things that's become apparent is that there are so many programs that are out there, so many companies doing good work, community organizations, all sorts of folks doing things, but it seems very scattered to me. And the question is, how do you pull that together and create some sense of scale? Because I think that's what we're really talking about. We may have lots of good ideas. How do we get the best ideas? How do we scale them up to a level where we're actually creating the critical mass that we need?
I think that's exactly the right question. I wish I had a good answer for you, because you don't have the discipline of the market. If somebody makes a terrific widget and there's a market for widgets, the best widget's going to likely win out. And the other technologies fade away. In education, our great tradition of local control in this country is at one level of tremendous strength, at another level a great challenge, because if I didn't think of it locally, then maybe it's not as good as the idea that your idea across town. And I joke that we do. I think have solved every education problem that we've got in America, somewhere in America, but try to replicate that success. And I think from the business perspective, there's a lot of encouragement. that at least there's a conversation taking place about some of these different business groups starting to work together. I mean, I look at our membership, and we support a lot of these, help fund a lot of organizations, but what you're getting with the validation at work like Tom Luce and other groups, I think you're starting to validate some of the things that work. What you need are more organizations and pushing those things that work, and maybe fewer organizations trying to figure out something new. Let's get everybody at a level of doing the best thing that's being done for, you fill in the blank, and that gets us a big lift right there. And then let's figure where we go from that point. But and let's get the lowest hanging fruit first, I guess. Sometimes the resources, I think, are often thrown at the hardest. We went through this, and Gaston and I were very active when we were doing welfare reform in the country. And there were this great debate that went on in America in the 90s. But, Brian, what you had is a sort of philosophical question. There were programs out there that were targeted at the person had never worked, or maybe hadn't worked for 2 generations, 3 generations. And there were programs that said, let's start with a person recently separated from the workforce. Well, those are very different questions. One's easier by far to get back. And I think in education, let's get the easier, let's start making progress where we got proven programs that we know work while we're trying to figure out the really hard ones. But let's not put on hold what we know we can do while we're trying to figure out what we haven't figured out.
Do you worry in a worst-case scenario that maybe we just don't have the critical mass of talent that we need?
No, I absolutely do not worry about that. I think this country is filled with talent. I think we've got a lot of talent on the sidelines. I think we got talent walking around in the street that we need to capture. I mean, we've got amazing talent, I think, as a nation, and I think that to me is one of the great strengths of America. I think our ability to think these things through and actually execute is still very, very much alive. And again, I would point to communities. Example in Detroit, Michigan, in Detroit's public school system problems are well documented, but there's a former state senator, a very liberal senator who, years ago we would have probably disagreed on most everything. But Doug got interested in charter schools, has devoted his life now to education, and has founded, with the help of a very conservative white business guy in the city of Detroit, these charter schools, and they're now getting 99% completion of the students, who are the same students that are failing over in the Detroit public schools, and 90+% are going on to college, and they're doing better in college than some of the kids coming out of what have been known as the leading schools in the city. It's an amazing success story, but the personal passion that he's put into this to make this, his leadership has made the difference. And the guy's name is Doug Ross. It's just amazing. And there would be skeptics who say, well, you can't do that. Well, not only he is doing it, and you can go see it.
Yeah, good. Well, we're going to have to leave it at that for now. I think we can, I think we can ask for a couple of questions from the audience if anybody has some things they'd like to ask the governor. Jim's got the mic, so over there, Jim, on the far corner.
Good morning, Rob Colorina, AIC Investments. Governor, good to see you again. The question I have that you didn't bring up is actually returns and actually some of the economic upside. Question, are you seeing, you're seeing this in the search area, you're seeing in the social media side, more gravitation to that, to some of the roundtable, but then even further, the attraction for students and professionals getting more into that sector because it creates, one, financial return, and secondly, sort of mobility, lifestyle, and you're seeing some of these companies from the U.S. driving some of the policy for some of the overseas participants as well.
I do think that, I don't know how much young people, and maybe I'm biased by, my daughter and some of her friends. I mean, it just doesn't seem like it's much of a starter to say, hey, you need to take this class because it's really going to pay off long-term. I mean, it's sort of like, huh? What do you, but the data for us as parents and as the community or the nation is pretty compelling. And some of the polling data that we've looked at, parents sort of get this. I mean, the public sort of gets it, and there's support. Next week, we've got a number of university presidents coming in. We're meeting with CEOs, and we're talking about this same topic, and maybe a little bit more research-oriented. But there are these conversations take place around the country, and I think that the economic case is one that's made, and I think the companies, in terms of competing for the talent, also both try to make the case and also try to create the conditions to make it attractive so I can win the talent competition in my company versus your company. I think that's all good. This is why I mean, how can it be that we can have a Facebook, everybody's sharing sort of all the goofy stuff they've done and kind of the fun things they do. You know, we actually need the Facebook for the careers where you've got people that, you know, gee, he or she is kind of like me, and look what they've done, and it was all because they were interested in mathematics. And I think in terms of the system, the education system, part of this is just in the way, and again, there are top programs. We've got a Michigan-born professor is going to be up here talking about, you know, when you see the lights go on with kids, it's amazing. In my case, the one daughter, the Montessori school that she started, was she found out she could add and subtract easily, do numbers in her head, and started. Next thing you know, she's moving on ahead of her sisters, and she just thinks about this stuff differently than her sisters do, and it's just the way it is. But at least in this case, she found out about it and acted on it.
Right there, Jim. Yeah.
Hi, Ann Drobness. I'm an Einstein Fellow at the National Science Foundation and actually a teacher at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Tech. And I'm actually more interested in looking at education throughout the country because TJ is a unique place, but we know it's not replicable to the grand masses. But in your second daughter, and
now
how
that's
can
interesting. Okay, go ahead and ask your question. I want to ask about the replicability because that's...
In your second daughter, who you talked about as she has the aptitude and the ability, but just not the interest, and how do you think, or your corporations that you work with, or universities, how can we spark interest in those people? Because that's really where we need to go in the future.
It's a wonderful question, and it's exactly what some of Tom's data points out, and that's the easiest way to increase it. And I think I'm talking candidly about one family, but I suspect this example is maybe not unfamiliar with people, is that, you know, she sort of looks at her sister and thinks, oh, God, she's the good one in math. I'm not. Now, she happens to be very good at it, but she's well, I'm not. And you know, and so in that case, you try to encourage her, but I think the systems, I think I mean, she's getting a good math education. Can there be the right kind of career? Because I've got the other one, the third one that we haven't talked about. She kind of doesn't think this is her interest, but then she said, well, I like fashion. I said, well, you know what fashion is? It's all about mathematics and angles and kind of, you know, you can point out that, I mean, this underlies so much of everything. She likes games too, and I mean, gosh, what's that all about? And so I think part of this is just in how we're explaining what it is that people do in life, and I think that's where we've been kind of unimaginative, perhaps, and I think that there are things that we're seeing out that are getting better. I think we've got some ideas that are coming today in terms of presentation and but that's where we ought to put our emphasis. On the replicability of it, TJ, one of the things that, and it's been kind of an interesting thing, is I've talked in other parts of the country about other schools that are on this list. It does seem to me that one of the challenges that we have in the country also is for the very the very best students, and TJ's are competitive, for those who aren't familiar, it's competitive admission to get in. So it's interesting. It'll often get written up in the Washington papers as this sort of elite school, but it's not economically that way. It's academically that way. And I think in other places that the kind of programs which allow some of our most talented students also to move at a faster pace need to get emphasized. I think a lot of those programs went on the chopping block years ago, and so there's a need. If we look at our investment in academically talented, our investment in our special education programs, it's actually disproportionate as a nation, and we need to think about that.
I'm thinking maybe there's a reality TV show in the governor's family. If you'd be
Oh,
up for that.
No, I'm not up for that.
I think we could illuminate some of these issues in a very, very constructive way.
Yeah, you're all welcome to come to the house, and have a conversation with these girls. See how you do with 16-year-old girls.
Jim, do we have time for one more? Anybody has a great thought out there? No great thoughts. That's all right. Well, let's.
A very brief break while we impanel everybody on the risers, and so it'll be just a couple of minutes, so don't stray.
Great. And please thank Governor Engler for his time and his insights here. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much, Mort. I didn't realize that I didn't pay enough attention, I should say, that making science cool was going to be the subject, because I spent the last weekend with three of my 5 granddaughters who are 12, 10, and 8, and they would be surprised that their grandfather was talking any place where people were talking about being cool. So if I'd have seen that, I would have not accepted Mort's invitation. Good morning. It's a great honor for me to be part of this discussion with such incredible, smart, and talented people. I want to thank Mort.
There's no more important issue in America. So what this kind of an education will do for the individual student will also benefit the nation. Companies can't fill these jobs because of the issues being discussed by our distinguished participants today. Specifically, the persistent achievement gaps in science and math education among America's young people and the need to raise the baseline talent for jobs, American jobs, that a robust STEM education would achieve. Indeed, with STEM education being so critical to America's innovative capacity and ultimately a thriving national economy, STEM progress should and could certainly be under the microscope among lawmakers and policy experts as we enter a year of election campaigning, or maybe 10 years of election campaigning. As part of our growing interest at U.S. News in addressing the STEM crisis, we're launching this morning a new rankings of America's best high schools for math and science. The rankings are a way to highlight success and best practices and hopefully to provide examples that others can learn from. Congratulations to High Tech School in Lincroft, New Jersey, Basis School in Tucson, Arizona, and Thomas Jefferson High School right here in Alexandria, Virginia. You can find the rest of the winners on usnews.com. I'm sure that today's panel of experts will add greatly to our understanding of this complex yet vitally important issue. Knowing that they all have significant pressures on their time, on behalf of U.S. News and World Report, I'd like to thank each of them for being with us this morning and sharing their considerable expertise. I also want to extend thanks to our corporate sponsors. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mort Zuckerman. I'm the chairman and editor-in-chief of U.S. News and World Report, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the National Press Club and this morning's breakfast and discussion which is entitled Making Science Cool, Solving the Shortage of Math and Science Teachers and Students. Today's topic on science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, STEM education could not be more timely. I think it is the most urgent aspect of education reform because it is not only about the future, but about the present. It is about teaching and inspiring students in global competition, but it is also about jobs, and not just jobs, but jobs that are available right now. There's Dell Inc. and AT&T. Both Dell and AT&T have shown great interest in STEM education through their many corporate and community initiatives. Their participation in open forums like today's summit only underscores their commitment and advocacy. I'd like to thank both Bell and AT&T for their vote of confidence in joining U.S. News and all of you here today in this urgent endeavor. We expect to be doing a lot more like this in the future. Finally, I'm going to introduce one of the most important people in guiding American education today. He was a successful businessman and governor of West Virginia, and for more than a decade has brought these much-needed skills to the education sector. He's also a delightful human being. Please welcome the president of the College Board, Gaston Caperton.